Well, I'm curious. I want to get into that patient registry that you talked about. Before I get into that, though, I have two questions to follow up. When you talk about predicting attacks or predicting, issues that might arise, in your case, when a lot of the data is input directly by the user itself, how are you able to detect that? Are you, in this case, reaching out on a daily basis or weekly basis and asking users to input information that might be an indicator based on the previous information that they've submitted that could lead to an attack, and then from that provide a warning? Or is there already a notification on their phone when they wake up saying, hey, you might have a headache right now, it could be pretty bad,
Today
or
would be
other
a
issues?
today will be a nightmare. Um, that's actually a very tough ethical question, and that's not just migraine. If I tell you before a stroke attack, if I tell you before a stroke epilepsy or a migraine epilepsy that you will get it, what is it causing? In many people, it's causing stress. And the stress is actually usually a factor in increasing the risk of having it. So one of the key points we had to solve, the first time we did those predictions in 2014, we had to think about ethically what happens. So the one thing we decided to do was to start developing methods to help the patient in relaxing, in reducing their stress level, in case we are announcing that that the attack is coming. And one thing we've been waiting for was also drugs that you could take before the attack is starting. And that happened this year. So we had to wait for quite some time.
Wow.
We knew it was in development. And so, because just to share, and that's not specific to migraine again, is any drug has side effects. And one specifically nasty side effect that you can have in all the drugs touching with your brain is that your brain gets used to it. If your brain gets used to a drug, it can actually create the problem to get it again when you stop taking it. So in the case of migraine, if you take too much of the drugs meant to stop the attack, you can get your brain to create the attack. And that's called, for example, rebound headaches. So it's a huge, huge responsibility when you announce that the patient may have an attack. And in some cases, it can fall into the medical device. So in our case, what we did is we started with a subsegment of patients who are conscious of their own signs. The weather, patients who consider that they're impacted by the weather, and we worked on tools to help them in anticipating by assisting them in evaluating their sensitivity to the weather and how the weather is changing. And others is patients who have prodromes like yawning. In my case, before migraine, for example, I'm super energetic, like Steve Ballmer. You know Steve Ballmer? Yeah. So we help the person in learning about their signs so that they can take the decision by themselves and we're not an external source of stress. And what comes in the future is more and more and more of those tools. That's the same thing as the self-driving car. You have to go through those steps in between. You cannot make it totally automatic immediately because you have people's lives at stake. But you can use the artificial intelligence and the machine learning to help the persons in taking decisions. And what we do differently from others is that we think that it's very important to help the patients in taking decisions and not just help the doctors in taking the decisions for the patients.